Loren, what's up?
Hey, good to see you, Ryan.
I don't know if did you look and see what episode you had done the last time you were on the show?
I did not. It's been a long time. What, it's been like 6 years.
Yeah, I think you were like episode like 40 or something like that. And by the way, which I think the reason I'm bringing this up, Loren, is I think for the listeners, it's a great container of like thinking about what has happened over 6 years, not only for our entrepreneur careers, but we talked about how implementing a SaaS product that's custom can actually change your industry category to have a multiple off of a SaaS company or a product company that's not just services or manufacturing. And how about to increase the multiple and increase the valuation? And now we're sitting here with AI, which changes the whole conversation we had 6 years even more dramatically about valuation, scaling, what does it mean? And why I'm really excited, and I'll let you give an overview to the listeners. Why I was really excited to have you on the show about this topic, Loren, practicality, right? Like we don't need another, huge white paper about all the hypotheticals. This is about like, what are we doing about this today? Where is it going for privately held business owners who don't have billions of dollars of resources to hire the next AI consultant, but yet you've been at this for a long time. So do you want to like give us maybe the container of an overview? Because I'm thinking about the early 90s when you started talking about this stuff.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty interesting. So, what we were talking about 6 years ago, I think that's interesting as well, because this is all part of that. It's just an expansion of this focus. But, since then, we've helped a lot of clients and ourselves develop different products and take those to market using that methodology. So I think that's a great,
So what have you been doing for the listeners who haven't listened to that? So what's your business? What's your career and what you've been spending your time on?
Yeah. So I've been in software development pretty much my whole career. I started off as a commodities trader, actually. And I have an economics degree. So made for an interesting background getting into software in the 90s. And I think it's interesting what we're going to talk about AI today. I was actually doing AI before I was a software developer. In the financial markets in the 90s. And so I would go to these meetups at different financial institutions in Minneapolis, and we would talk about AI stuff. And it was fascinating, and I was learning a lot. And I really, that was one of the, I was really trying to figure out how you could apply this to be useful in a business. And in the trading world, that was definitely possible to apply. We never quite figured it out back then, but now what you can do.
You automated the hell out of what you were doing. You want to just give them just the data point? I don't know.
I worked on a whole accounting for a trading department, and this is how I actually learned to code. I've taken one software class my entire life, but I've learned how to teach myself, which is a big deal. And we had taken on all the accounting ourselves instead of outsourcing it to where we were outsourcing it. And I was getting out of work at like midnight, 1 a.m. And basically, a guy we were sharing office space with said, "Hey, I have this software tool if you want to try to learn it." And I had dabbled in software a lot over the last, in high school and college. And so I learned that. And a couple of weeks later, we get our data at 3:00. I was done at 3:05 every day, not just with the accounting data, but everything else for managing all the funds and everything we had to do was like automatic. I'm like, I think I'm better at this. I should go do this instead of trader.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted. Which so you're talking, not a formal software development career, but like when you're talking about AI back then, what did it mean then? And has your definition changed? And sorry, I didn't mean to derail you as you're kind of telling your story, but what was the meaning of AI back in the 90s when you were talking about it compared to now? Is it different?
Well, yes and no. It's the same, right? I mean, what is possible is different because of the capacity that we have now, but the problems and stuff. So I think it's interesting. One of the things that I talk to a lot of CEO groups, and I've been speaking a lot on this the last 6 months, and I think it's interesting that so many people have a fear of this, but they have the wrong fear. So they have the fear that kind of the sci-fi interpretation of this is the problem, but that's not the fear you should have. The fears you should have are your competitors are doing this if you're not, and they're going to figure out a way to leverage this. And the second fear is, yes, with any technology, there's going to be massive amounts of positive, but massive amounts of negative, and that's due to people, not due to the software, right? So that's what you should be afraid of, is how people are going to use this. And so again, back to how you can leverage it to actually provide good. and to some degree to combat the negative, but also to provide good with what you're doing in your business. So that's really our motivation is like, I want to help. I've always had a passion for small, mid-sized companies, family owned businesses that are trying to grow, trying to figure things out, and stay competitive. And, this is a highly technical market, and it is, with the chat interfaces, it's all suddenly become super simple, but that's not really true when you want to integrate with a real solution in your company necessarily. So our goal is to still make that simple and create targeted solutions for exactly what you're trying to implement in an organization that can be beneficial. So that's changed drastically. And I think what's interesting, I kind of, I've worked on a lot of other software tools over the years, and we've implemented AI on and off. And, AI is kind of a weird term in itself. It's really machine learning, right? But it's a building on machine learning, and there's lots of different ways to do this. Well, the machine learning piece we've actually implemented in lots of software projects over the last 25 years but they're very specific, right? So it's like, I need a categorization tool. Well, a lot of times machine learning tools would do that. Or I need, we built some pricing tools.
I'm thinking about back in my old world, Loren, about like the Kofax AnyDoc, where you're doing ODBC lookups and you're making it learn about how to scrape data off of invoices and shit. And it's just like, I mean, there's machine learning there, but it's not AI per se.
Right. So
maybe
now
you would correct me.
The part that scares people is the fact that now I can go to ChatGPT and type in a search, and all of a sudden I get back something that looks human-like. It's like, that's shocking for sure. Where before it was always like, you need a computer science or mathematics degree to really understand how to implement a lot of these things.
Is this the Netscape event for AI?
That's a good question.
And do you want to explain that for the listeners? Sorry, I just pulled that out of.
Well, you explain it but I'll come back and answer that because I have a thought on that.
So the Netscape, from what I understand, and I'm 36, almost 37, right? So there's a little bit of like context that I was not, in the working world when the Netscape came out, but like it went from, you needed it was the DARPA thing. People were pinging, big mainframe servers and stuff, right? And then all of a sudden the average person could type in without a computer science degree and access the internet. And it was like, hey, now the lay people can use the interconnective, machine language.
That's exactly right. But so I think it's kind of like the web in the sense that, yes, all of a sudden it's become accessible for people, but it hasn't become super useful necessarily. I mean, it has become useful, but not where it's going to be in 12 months, 18 months. And that's what's happening. So I think just like we saw web and then web 2.0, and now they're calling it web 3.0 now, like 30 years later. Like, I think this is like AI 1.0 kind of, and it's going to transition a lot in the next 12 months as we figure out like now, okay, models are going to.
Yeah, well, because Netscape, like even me saying Netscape, like I didn't use Netscape. It was AOL and it was the chat. So like we had already gotten past the Netscape by the time I started adopting most of the stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, you're young, but
I know. I don't know if this is going to age well, or like, well, it's showing me at least.
But it's very similar in the sense that we will transition through this, and that's what we're trying to come up with tools that can help a business implement that, because that's going to be the next. Like it's the models are going to get better, the tools are going to get better, and the processes are going to get better. And then it's going to become more consistent on how people implement this and where this is good and where it's not good. And I think, I have a lot of fun. There's areas that traditionally AI has not been very good at, but it's fun playing with. Like a lot of it is solving the problem differently, so you have to think about it. And one of the most, I read a lot of the tech articles, and that's kind of my job, is to keep up with what researchers are doing and stuff in AI. One of my favorite articles was put out about 5 months ago, probably by Microsoft Research. And I just think it's interesting. It's always kind of been an assumption that programming robots was not a good AI thing. And while that's been true traditionally, they actually figured out that it's a matter of framing the question differently. And they were then able to say, all right, train up this robot. And then I think it was like a minute or something, it learned itself on how to do the task it was supposed to do.
This is almost like, and I don't, for the listeners, we're going to get into the practical stuff, but hopefully we're set in the context here, is like, I honestly, Loren, I draw so many parallels of the hardware versus software issue. Our hardware is our bodies. Our software is our mind. And the mind can be decoupled. That's consciousness. That's like, I mean, really what I'm continuing to watch. And like, I sent you a podcast with Jordan Peterson, this Brian guy. I don't know if you listen to that, where they're talking about how psychology is going to be driving a lot of these decisions, because the big thing about it is about alignment. And it was one of the two fears you mentioned, which is, what's the intent? If this is a knife, I could butter my peanut butter and jelly or kill you. It's my intent. Yep. So this alignment and this intent with kind of like the software and the hardware is just different. And so I'm thinking, am I thinking about this in ways that you think are productive?
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't know. My goal is to stay away from the philosophical stuff, because you can lose yourself, and people have been talking about this for 50 years and you will lose yourself. My goal is, how do I make this super applicable for people to do good with it? And I think it's interesting. I meet with all these CEOs and we're implementing things, and it's I've only had one person ever tell me, well, hey, how can I get rid of my whole team and replace them with AI? And I'm like, well, you're asking the wrong question, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it's interesting. We can take your team and accelerate them with key things that they can really do, in most cases with AI, right? So it's like, that's my goal. I don't believe these philosophical things are conversations worth having. It comes from so many other foundational principles that people have. So, from religious beliefs and politics and all these other things are driving a lot of these conversations that are valuable to have. I don't think you shouldn't have them. I try to stay out of them, because I think my goal is it's going to get implemented.
Which is honestly
this for positive.
And what you just said is exactly why we're talking, because I didn't want to have add another philosophical hour or plus conversation to the internet, because it's not necessary, because there's plenty of stuff out there. And what I want to dive into with you is, and it's exactly how you worded it, why I'm so interested in what you're doing in this conversation is, the entire point of my podcast and my business is to help people clarify their outcome and then get there faster.
Yeah.
And so like, for the listeners in here, we're not going to be clarifying the outcome necessarily on this call, but this is if you are clear on the valuation, what you want to do, how you want to do it. There are so many practical ways to leverage and scale, I think. And Loren, and if you got comments on that, I want to hear them. But also the follow-up to this is, you would mention that it's not as useful right now as it will be in 12, 18 months. I think this is also part of what you're working on. So maybe you can unpack, what does useful mean for you, and how does that fit into this conversation?
Yeah. So, well, I think we're all learning. Like, everybody's learning a lot right now, and that's why, like, it's really fun for me, because it's like kind of the early. Like, I was involved in the very early web days. Like, I had started doing web development like a month after web development was possible, right? And there were all these things. It's like, oh, I could do this, but the tech's not quite there, right, to do this or that, or so it was just learning all these things, and we're in that same space right now, like. Everything kind of seems conceivable and possible. And one of my favorite things right now is I'm on Twitter, and I'll be watching a lot of researchers, and they'll post something on Twitter, and a day later they'll post some code. And then, a week later they have, 1 million downloads of their code online, that everybody's trying it. And there's like this massive desire to learn and pick this up and experiment and give them feedback, where I think researchers are enjoying it, but I'm enjoying it as an application. How do we apply this? I think it's really cool. We're in this time frame that things are going to change very, very, very rapidly, and like a little trigger can have this massive movement. Now, as we think about applying, it doesn't apply to everything. Or some things are much more difficult to apply to, and this is where. I'm in meeting with a lot of people, and I don't know how this scales. I think this is a skill that is developing, and there will be more AI consultants to kind of help where there's certain things you want to apply. My take, there's kind of a level of business capabilities that it can do right now that are really good, and it's about how you structure it, though, and a lot of that is dependent on having your own data. So as a foundation, we're working on building a solution. So ModelMind is our company. We're building a solution that basically allows you to easily create a data set and then query that data set. Now, we're building in a lot of the enterprise kind of capabilities around, okay, I want to grant this data set to these people so you can control. As an example, in an organization, if you're doing that, well, let me back up. My point number one, you need to think about your data and protecting your data privacy if you're talking about AI at all. And this is number one. I'm amazed. I've talked to a whole lot of groups, and a couple people have said, we've met with 20, 30, we've gone to so many sessions. Nobody's ever said protect your data. I'm like, if that's not the number one thing out of any AI consultant's mouth, that you have a problem. So
why is that, dude? Like,
I don't understand.
I even get that.
Yeah.
Like if I'm putting all my data out there, and I don't know if it's because of how much I'm out there scouring and learning all the time, is like, there was something I saw years ago, Loren, and it was like, and it was this tipping point. I don't know when it was, called like 5 years ago, when data became more valuable than actual crude oil.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, data is what feeds the machine.
Right.
So like, of course you want your own data and not to give it to other people, right? Like, who would want to send their customer list to, and maybe it's part of being an M&A where it's like, you know what I mean?
But as you think about that, so why is this important? So number one, you got to think about the types of data you have. So this is why we break this down into different data sets. So you have, so first of all, AI is really good at content creation, right? Now, there's flaws with this, and people look at AI and say, oh, it gave me a bad result. I agree, it gives you lots of bad results. But it's no different than I said, hey, Ryan, I want you to program this application. Well, I would get a bad result because you don't know how to do it. Not that you can't do it. I just have to teach you how to do it. And if I taught you how to do it, you'd do it fine. So it's the same with the AI. You have to guide it and give it the information and the process, and then it can actually do that very well in most cases. So I think it's interesting. You have to start there with how do I guide it to get what I want? Now, we think about this as like, let's say in an organization, I want to use this to create marketing content. It's a pretty typical first use case for people. Well, that's great. So I have kind of all my external facing content that I want to put into that data set that I want to query. But I also have maybe some internal kind of marketing strategy stuff that I want to use to query, but it's not going to go out there specifically, but it's going to be used in the final product. And that's great. But so now I have a different data set where I say, I want to use this to, work on strategy and financial data that I'm working on, right? Well, I want that to be separate because I don't want any of that to leak into what I'm putting into marketing material, right?
Yep.
So this is why you need separation and control over those different data sets.
So let's just use mine as a use case, because I've been talking to you about this, and you're right. As content is just the obvious one right now, but we're going to get into all the other functional areas that actually tie into principle 4 about de-risking your company and the functions of a company. But when I think about mine and about the data sets that I want to protect, I have 360, whatever this episode's going to be, 360 plus hour plus long transcriptions of conversations that I've had, and 10 and a half hours of transcriptions from the Intentional Growth Academy that are organized perfectly like a book. By the way, I got quoted $90,000 for someone to ghostwrite my book, and I'm just going to wait for your plugin so I can just do it. And but to your point, how I'm thinking about this, Loren, is I have my proprietary conversations where I want to, because right now with ChatGPT, I can only string together 2,400 words at a time, and it's totally an Achilles heel right now for me and my team. But if I can set an AI over all of Ryan's content, I want to learn and train it to be able to create material off of that. But then I don't want that out in the outside world. But in the outside world, I want to be able to ping U.S. Census data about business owners. And then I want to combine those things in certain areas, but I don't want all of my material for other people to learn. And that's where, isn't this where a lot of the copywriting people, the musicians, the artists are having issues because the AI is learning off of their copyrighted material?
Yeah, exactly. But you don't want it learning off that material. But I also, like back in January with ChatGPT, and their rules have changed some now, but like some people at Samsung had a team meeting, very strategic internal information, and then they went to ChatGPT and said, hey, can you, I think one of them was create a PowerPoint presentation out of this. Well, all that was reused for training. So all that data is now part of ChatGPT, and anybody can go find out about that.
Insider trading? Actually, no, because you posted it.
Exactly. So, whoa. But this is why you got to protect your data. Yeah, it's a big problem, and people don't think about that. But now it's going to be, I think, one of the skills that we're going to have going forward, and companies are approaching this in a lot of different ways. is the ability to think through who has access to what sets of data. So we think about, like, we have a file server and we give different rights to different people, but now it's really like managing those rights more at more of a granular level to say, yeah, you can use this and you can't use that for these situations, but you could use it for this situation. So as a person, I might have access to all this, but I only want to use this in this context of marketing or something versus something that was for external or internal consumption or partner consumption or something like that, right? So it really matters how you're thinking about your data and then the ability to control that data.
It makes tons of sense. As we're going down this conversation, like one of the biggest questions a lot of these business owners have that you and I are constantly working with in the middle market is, what does this mean to me? What does this mean to my operations? And what does this mean to where I'm trying to get the company? What do you think? How do you want to tackle this, man?
Well, I guess let me throw a few things out and then we can kind of go from there. But I think it's interesting. We have been working very heavily on how to even think about implementing this, because that's what everybody's asking me is, how do I actually implement this? Well, part of this is, our product should hopefully help you because you can use your own data and control that and secure it. So we're secure all the way through to be able to do that. But there's a whole lot of other steps in your organization to think about as you're going to roll this out. And so whether it's a really small company, I'm talking to people that are a couple people, or individuals, like writing books is a big one. I have all this content, and how do I want to transition it into a book or training content or some other format, right? So I think this comes down to a couple things. So what we're telling people, CEOs, when I meet with CEOs, we're telling them basically, you need to tell your team, don't use AI. But the goal is you're working on a plan on how you're going to use AI. So I think this is something that we've seen very quickly here, that there is huge risk to this, and you just have to be very conscious of the risk and proactive about mitigating the risk by making the right choices on tools you're implementing. So I was doing a presentation a couple weeks ago, and I think it's interesting. All these guys, I was over Zoom, and all these guys are like, "Hey, I installed the ChatGPT app," and they're holding up I'm like, "Oh, wait a second, can I see that?" Like, you didn't install ChatGPT app; you installed somebody else's app. You have zero understanding of what the licensing or what they're getting recorded, what's getting recorded, what's getting tracked. So any data you put in there is high risk. Like you have no control over that. So
I was just gonna say, like, thank you. I've been watching the peripheral. My God, the abundance and the growth. I can't say the word is of like these software tools. And I'm like, all they're doing is piggybacking off of other people's material, and then they're opening up this gate of siphoning out people's information with no accountability.
Yeah. Well, and I'll be honest, we're doing the same thing, but we're doing it where we're tracking every tool we're using and making sure that it's actually. So we're not using ChatGPT directly. We're going through Azure because we have an enterprise agreement, and we can actually manage this all securely and encrypted. And so there's all these things that we're looking for.
But that is powered by the actual OpenAI GPT, right?
Yeah, because it's their implementation of it, which is highly secured and enterprise restrictions. So I've worked with like banks and very, very secured institutions. So we've had to go through audits of all this, and so we're using those same models for everything we're doing in this process. But the other thing is any tool that we do have, that's really the tool we're using. But if we had to use any other tool, we're tracking that then to say, anytime there's a license agreement, like you get all these notifications for license agreements, software you own, right? Who reads them? Nobody reads them.
Yeah, right.
You have to read those now if they're part of your AI pipeline, because they do change, and that change can be catastrophic. So I think that's something to think about as we're looking at. So that's the one thing. So we say don't use AI right now, but then we say create a team around this. So you are thinking about how to implement it, and then identify kind of the low-hanging fruit, right? Where should you look at? What are the maybe 2 to 3 areas that you want to look at initially? And then identify those. And so what we're finding is a lot of people are finding content creation things that are really important early on, and that's a great place to start. But some of the others are like data integration or very custom, and maybe that's something you can do, but it's going to be more specific to your business, and it's not going to be as easy to implement. So you want to start to identify where are the things you can do to kind of get familiar with this and experiment in places that you can actually make that productive and
without the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And like Loren, as we keep going about different places to apply AI, like one thing that I find so fascinating, man, and I'm gonna riff here for a second, is like it's so crazy to me, dude. Like when I do these presentations, these workshops, and I'm getting the exposure, kind of like you are, but like, I've got my spiel about intentional growth, and most people don't have a target valuation, like 90+%, which means they have the wrong goal or no goal at all. And it's some bullshit revenue number that means nothing. I mean, obviously revenue is important. So I'm putting my caveats all over for everybody. It's like, but like there's the wrong goal because it's not the only goal is the target valuation and the cash flow on the way there. And if that goal is not there, people are just making shit up.
Yeah.
Like, what are we working on? I don't know. Let's just grab this off the shelf. And what I've watched is AI exacerbate that problem. Mm-hmm. So they're taking the ass backwards approach of look at these cool things. What do we want to do with them versus this is the goal. How do we get to $3 million in normalized EBITDA faster or bigger? And we're going to take our plan and then look at AI and how we're going to apply AI to the steps of our plan versus look at Mid-Journey or so I don't know if you can speak to like, that's kind of the whole intent and then getting there faster versus kind of just.
Well, I think that's a good point because I don't do this in my presentation anymore, but I started earlier this year. I was doing this in my presentation. I was showing like, okay, here's kind of the chat tools. Like you have ChatGPT, you have Bard, you have now integrated into Bing and like kind of the chat tools, right? Because chat is very interesting and very engaging for people. But then I'm like, here I listed like 30 other tools that you can use that are AI tools, right? But they're all very specific tools generally, right? So there's like writing tools and there's video tools and there's audio tools and there's development tools, software tools. There's like a tool for everything. And now, a couple months after that, there's hundreds and thousands of tools actually. And so you can apply AI in your business in a way that would make sense. You have to understand what the problem is because what tool do you even start with or what tools you're going to narrow that down to focus on your problems. So I think there's a lot of kind of chat-based solutions around content creation that can be done that can be useful in most businesses, but there's all sorts of specific things that could apply more importantly to your business and add more value to your business. I think one of the key points I make in my presentation is that don't be afraid to build your own AI, actually, because there's lots of cases where you need to build a custom AI. And this goes back to kind of the machine learning model. Like you might customize this and now people are aware of this. There's lots of cases where that's the right thing to do. And actually, it's going to be very consistent data and very consistent outputs, but you can have the AI generate that. Well, it's a custom software project to do that with your solution now. And I think that's going to change a lot.
Can you, for the listener, I love that. I love how you're going in that. Can you, for the listeners, explain what you mean by custom AI? And like, what does that mean? Because like for people that aren't familiar with software development or something like that, it's like, okay, do I have to develop my own firm or my own AI? Yeah. Why develop my own AI versus, some other approach?
Well, let's take an example. So what is AI? AI is just a machine learning technique, right? And so now what we talk about like GPTs and stuff, these are like LLM stands for large language model. And all these are AIs with massive amounts of data loaded into them, right? Billions, hundreds of billions of data points. Well, it has so much data that then it can, and trained properly, it can actually do the queries on that. But in this world, like 10 years ago, if you said, okay, I want an AI solution, it basically would have been, and there's still lots of UI tools to help you build this, but you would basically build a custom model. And all the model is you're taking a whole bunch of of data, and you're using some amount of that data to train your model, and then you're using a smaller amount of it to validate your model, right?
And so it's really just, I have an idea. I want this. Like, what's the whole? I want to know what diabetes drug will impact insulin, and we're gonna put out the algorithm, and then we're gonna say, can you try this out? And it's really just an if this then that, if this then that, right?
Yeah, but basically what you're doing is you're pulling in massive amounts of training data, and then you're running it through a training process. And so most of these are based on, this is based on a neural network is what we're talking about. And the neural network has these inputs and then it has outputs. But in between there, it has all sorts of connections. And all the training is doing is adjusting those connections until it gets the right answer for this input, this gets this answer, right? Mm-hmm. So that's all that's happening. And that's what's happening in, ChatGPT and all these. It's the same process. However, you can train this to do a very specific process. You could say, let's program a car that can drive itself. Well, maybe you're just going to use a camera. So you have a camera and it's looking for certain points. And based on this, I need to turn right. Based on this, I need to turn left. So your outputs are left, right, forward, back. But you have lots of different images that show you where you're at. And some of them are training data and some of them you're going to use as testing data. And you're going to validate, does this model actually work, right? So that's
how is that any different than like you're a coder, someone's a CPA, someone's an attorney, because they spent a lifetime with their neural links, their freaking brain, learning how things work, and you're just trained on certain skills.
Yeah.
When I think about the large language model, Loren, the LMM part of this, there's this graph that I'll include in the show notes for the listeners. Is when it was like this old employee thing where there was a triangle and says, hey, when you have 3 employees, this is how many connections there are. Yeah. And there's just a triangle. And then when you have 4, and then it eventually becomes like this, like when you have like 15 or 20, the whole thing looks like almost like a fully drawn in circle because of how many the different combinations. So you add one more connection to that. So you go from 19 to 20, and it's truly exponentially the amount of connections you have. And that's just a neural network, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, so now I got to jump in here and add my big goal of what we're really trying to get to. And so our foundational piece is to be able to work with your data, right? So you need to take your data. But ultimately, what we're working towards is the ability to create kind of bots. So every bot is its own AI, basically. And you could have, basically, we want to train up a bot that matches your job role. So if you think, I talked to a lot of traction people and you have an org chart in any organization. Mm-hmm. Well, now I want to partner everyone in my team with their own bot that understands their job role, but also the bot's role. Now the bot could assign them tasks and they can assign the bot tasks and work collaboratively, right? This is where we're working on getting, and it's all based on foundationally, we need to get your data in and working with your data. But then you have to basically define these job roles. And it's no different than how do you onboard a team member? Well, now how do you onboard a bot to work with your team member? And what we're excited about is one of the things that's coming out of our testing of this is that we can capture huge amounts of your knowledge base of your organization by having a bot partnered with your team. And now if someone left or something, you still have that information because it's embedded in your bot system instead of just in people's brains.
Dude, it's just like, I freaking love it.
That's where we're going. But this is where I'm saying, like, in the next 12 to 18 months, there's going to be lots of improvements and things like that. And honestly, there are some scary things with that. But it depends. Like, we're still in charge of the tools, and we get to choose how it's going to work and what it can respond to. So it's not like it's going off operating without us. But I'll tell you, I was running this one day, and I was using it to write some code, actually. And I think in 4 hours, I ran 37,000 AI queries, and I wrote like 52 pages of really good code that was actually written with this.
What would it for the non-coders? What would your old output have been?
I would have to do these pages would have probably been at least a week of work.
Well, and dude, like, I think for the listeners in there, I mean, I think it's try not to lose Loren and I, where it's like every position, it's all about the intent. Like we have these functional areas of a business, right? We have the goal of, there's the financial goal of the target normalized EBITDA and the multiple by the risk of the cash flow. And then there's the functional areas that are helping the company get there. But then there's the product or service that will always be delivered, right? So the product or service is being delivered, and it's just about streamlining and automating and scaling all of those administrative tasks that everybody hates doing anyways.
Right.
Think about this, Loren. We call it cost of goods. It's a cost. So like, let's lower the costs of goods. And then we call it overhead, which is non-productive overhead to the delivery of the good or service. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I just wanted to roll out the announcement that Loren was so generous of giving all the Intentional Growth listeners is 10% off of his training for AI business implementation. and you're going to learn all the stuff that he's talking about in the podcast. It's 10 hours, and they're talking about data security to employees, and there's just a ton of material that I highly recommend. I'm excited to dive in myself because, yes, even though I might, think I understand the philosophical or the technology behind a large language model, applying it practically in a business without risking your whole business by accident or doing something dumb. The risks are very high, but the upside's very high. So I highly recommend going and diving in. And then also in the show notes below is a link to the Model Mind AI platform that Loren's talking about, that also Arcona is going to be getting access to as we speak. Very excited. I will keep everybody posted on how that's going. But what I'm very pumped about is it's going to take a lot of the principles we talk about in the intentional growth and then allow you to apply AI to those principles so you can create more sustainable, predictable, transferable cash flow. So check out his education as well as his platform. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the interview.
Well, but it's also so I've worked in lots of project teams. Everybody's worked in project teams, and I get annoyed. I always say the harder the project, the smaller the team you should have. And it's exactly what you're talking about is the communication loop. It has to be so much greater the more people in the project. And if you're really trying to solve a hard problem, you need enough knowledge to be able to solve the problem, but no more, right? No more project managers, no more, business people giving guidance. It's like, you need the people that can solve that problem and nothing more, because otherwise you're spending way too much time communicating and not enough time solving the problem.
Right. And so think about this, like how I've described this is like, and please tell me if I'm not thinking about this the right way, because this is the first public conversation I've had about AI, because I'm trying to, just like everybody else, trying to figure out how is this applicable, trying to get rid of the philosophical, more of the practical. But I'm like, in theory, if you have a company that delivers a product or service, right? So someone's paying someone for something. The other, if you go all the way back to the other end of the decision tree, it's truly the owners of that asset saying, I need and want $3 million in cash flow for this capital to make sense. And the capital is going to be stuck in this asset, delivering these goods and services. Everything in between the product or service being delivered and the owner saying that this is worth it for my parked capital is not, I'm not calling it complete waste, but it's all like how I think about this, Loren, is I've been kind of had this lens of, if your job is to go get information and then bring it back to someone else so that someone else can make a decision, you're kind of effed.
Yeah. I think that's
yeah. Okay.
I think that's true, but I caution people to say, with that mentality, it's basically get rid of all your people because you only need the decision makers. And I don't agree with that, because there's lots of people making decisions all the way through the process. However, there's lots of places where they're just doing what you just said. They're getting data and passing it on. So there's lots of work that they're doing that I think we can accelerate what they should be doing and taking a lot of this busy work off their hands through AI. But it's not really, my goal is not to eliminate your team. My goal is to, how do we partner with your team so that they're doing more of the productive work and they're providing guidance to the AI, because a big part of this, and people don't think about it, they think the AI has been trained, but you have to continue to train it on your data, your processes, and how you want it to work in order to get the results you want. So just like you would train employees as you brought them on, you need to be thinking about training your AI for what you're trying to get it to do.
And I appreciate that, man. And just to also reiterate what you said, I'm not about hey, go gut your company. What the lens that I'm coming at this with, Loren, because I think why this is so fascinating for our conversations is you're coming at so I'm coming at it from kind of the finance lens of what's the goal of the asset and the owner and all that stuff. And you're coming at it from the operations, which is what's going to get the owner the asset valuation that they want. But the problem that I see constantly, Loren, is that in the 90 to 95% of the companies that are below 5 million in revenue that I'm always talking about on the Census Bureau, mathematically, people cannot afford. I mean, they can't afford a CFO, which is why we have an offering, right? And the CFO, a couple, $200,000-$300,000, someone that's $10 million in revenue needs the oversight, because the controller doesn't know how to, it's kind of that whole what's the highest and best use of that advice, and then getting where you want to go faster, not gutting and going back. So it's more of can you 10x your company? Because my use case is dude, I want my book. I don't want to pay someone 90 grand for a ghostwriter. That's just completely insanity to me. And whether it's 30 or 90, it's still this clunky experience that I've tried. You got, I want a fractional content manager. I can't afford someone that's $250,000 to sit there and manage my whole, you know what I mean? So I think about eliminating that inefficiency so that the person like you and I that has the idea can actually get to execution faster instead of all of that waste inside.
That's exactly my goal, is how do we take your team and maximize what they can do? Yeah, 5x, 10x, 20x. Like, how do we hit growth numbers like that, leveraging this with your team? And that's exactly our whole point of what we're trying to do. So, and I think it can. Like, there's lots of areas that this can apply. The way to get started is just pick an area that is probably chat driven and start working from there, and you'll start to see results, and then look for the next thing. This is why, again, back to the implementation. How do we do this? Well, tell your team no AI, then start working on it and define a team. Even if you're a three-person company, I would say have all three people and define the team of like 3 people or so that are going to go out and figure out the areas where you should start to apply this, and then figure out the queries, the prompts that you need to do that, and help them, and then pass it over to whoever's going to be actually doing this every day, and then check that up, like every day. Like for right now, what we're telling our customers is every week, follow up with them. Did this work? Did they use it? What was the challenge with this? We've gotten fascinating responses from that, from some people who are like, well, I'm opposed to AI. And it's like, well, how do you deal with that in your team? And there's actually solutions for all these things, but it's just a matter of asking the questions and continuing the feedback, and then paying attention to the licensing for the products you're using in your business with us. So
it makes a ton of sense, man. And like, I think about how you just described that situation, which is very practical. And I'm just completely biased, because if people don't have the right goal with their business, like what the hell are they doing? They're all just making things up. So like, I think like in this, there's this whole, like, I went down this psychology route a few years ago, Loren, where like, I just went so down. I just loved it. And this, I learned a lot about perspective. And like, perspective is all like, if I have a desk, we all know what the desk is for, right? Unless my goal is to run out of the room as fast as possible because there's a fire. Well, the desk becomes an obstacle, or it becomes a desk. It's all about the intent. Like, we don't know what this desk is for unless we know what the intent is. So I think like and then it snaps the perspective it snaps the situation into perspective. So I think like it's so helpful for someone to know, hey, this is where we're trying to go. Because then you would know what marketing resources you need, what operational resources you need, what ERP resources, you know what I mean? Like, otherwise, how do you know if there's not, like, it's not tied to something?
But that also then goes to like, how do you apply AI? Well, you have to understand the plan of what you're trying to do with your company to actually get there. So your stuff is much more foundational. But once you have that plan and a goal and a plan, then you can say, okay, now where should we implement this that we can actually add value quickly?
And I wouldn't even say I appreciate how you word that. I just would change it slightly, because it's foundational. It's a container, right? Like, we're saying like, here's why we're all here. Now we have to actually build the foundation. And I would say that like what you're working on is like the foundation of the machine that's going to, the company that's going to get them where they are. But it's the people listening in that have to say, what are we doing here? Where are we going? And then it should be a little bit easier. For the people that are hesitant, how do you, or paralyzed because there's so many tools, like, how do you start to even tackle this topic, or not the topic, but like the implementation, other than like what we just talked about?
Well, so I think it's interesting. I have talked to a lot of CEOs, and this is new. It's technology, and it's technology that very few people really grasp at a level of, like, at a tech level, right? They can see the output. And so
why is it so few people actually understand it?
It's complicated. The mathematics behind these models is super complicated. I mean, I don't
know the mathematics, but I feel like I understand what it is and how to use it.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that you always understand the risk of a certain query or of a prompt, or how that, like, why did that give you a bad result, and thinking through the cases of how that would happen. So that's where things are interesting, to be able to talk through at like a scientific level of like why did this happen, and trying to understand how to make that better in the future. It's not a business thing. It's there's more to it than that, and so it's just a complicated process.
Well, it's like interesting. I was listening to a podcast about this, and like if I asked you a question, I don't know how you formulated it. It's like talking to another human. Like at some point, like I don't know actually how you come up with your opinions.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that, if you're treating your employees the same way, like you're asking your CIO or CMO to go do something that you might not know how to do, and they're using all of their judgment. So it's more of like, is that what you're saying is like what the output is? People don't know how to grasp how the output actually came out.
Well, they don't know how to improve that, right? So let me take an example. So another really good research paper, I can't remember if it was Microsoft research or not, but somebody put this out a couple months ago. And basically it's the idea of like, if you go type into ChatGPT and you get an answer and it's the wrong answer. Well, how can you do that query better? Well, so what their theory was, and they proved it out that it significantly improved the results, was they asked the question 3 times and you get different answers back. And then you have, so you actually have 5 calls. The first call is, here's my question. Give me 3 different versions of this question. Ask those 3 questions, get each a response. And then the 5th one is say, now takes these 3 responses and give me the correct answer based on this. And that improved the quality of the response drastically. And so like what I think is amazing is the value of chat is actually a hugely amazing thing. It's what makes it feel kind of personal and human-like, but it's actually the way that we communicate. One of the things I find very funny is as we're working on this, everybody I know says please and thank you when they're talking to chat, because it's very human-like. And so you have this human-like experience. However, we then skip over and say, oh, it's a tech and it gave me a wrong answer. But it's not, you have to treat it more like a human response and how you would treat a human, like an employee or something, to say, I need to give it more information and I need to feed it more like the direction I want it to go. So I just think that's really
I freaking love it, man. So Khan Academy, you familiar with Khan Academy, right? Yeah. So for the listeners that are not familiar with Khan Academy, I highly recommend going and checking out. It's like what's he been doing this for 15 years now? He like started teaching his niece or something like that. Now he's teaching hundreds of millions of people, free education. People are getting their like PhDs on it. But ChatGPT was learning off of Khan's database. So did you see him speak with dude, this is back to our like 7 years ago. Bold and Abundance, Peter Diamandis.
Oh yeah.
Is it Diamandis? I can never say his name right.
Yeah, I can't either. But
so he was interviewing Khan at his Abundance 360 workshop that someone actually attended that I know and sent me the video, and then it went on to YouTube. So these guys were talking. Loren, this was so freaking fascinating to me. So they're sitting there having a conversation about truly what does it mean to learn? Because Khan's sitting there with 15 years of data about how people learn through animations and the different types of learning. And then you got AI sitting on top of that.
Yeah.
So you know what they found out, dude? And this is really weird to me because I've been diving down like biology a lot with Peter Attia and Andrew Huberman and neuroscience. So I've gone down like consciousness, like AI and brain science all in the last year or so.
Yeah.
And I only say that because when Khan and Peter were talking about how they're thinking of structuring GPT now, Loren, is they're saying what you just said is people are getting weird responses for the first few, and you're having to like discipline it or ask it different ways, like you just said. So they were, I think it was Sam Altman then was talking with Khan, and they're talking about actually creating a barrier. So bear with me here for a second. They're talking about creating a barrier that GPT talks and it doesn't go out yet until it thinks through.
Yeah.
And then it outputs. You know what it just described is the freaking hippocampus, dude. The hippocampus is our short-term memory. And then when we sleep, all the memories go into the long-term storage of our prefrontal cortex. And I'm like, we're just creating the human brain again. Neurolinks, hippocampus, training it. I'm just like, this is so crazy, dude.
Well, we are creating the human brain, and that like if you look at the science behind it, it is, I mean, that's the goal. It's to model the brain. So
yeah, I want to
tell you one more story. So I think this is really interesting because you think about that, what we just talked about, in the negative sense that it gave me a wrong answer, and the way to get a better answer is to ask more different varied questions. But there's another use for that. And so we're doing, we write code. And so I've done a lot of training on code writing. And, we write code that is like, if you're writing Python code, GPT has been trained on this extensively. We're all in .NET. And so it's not as trained as well. So we train it, but we also do this back to this job role kind of thing. So I will train up a bot and give two bots the same role, except I will give them different attitudes. So I will say, you're a positive developer and you're a negative developer. And over my career, I hate working with negative developers, but there's huge value to it because they find every reason why everything can't work, right? But that's actually really valuable, even though it frustrates the heck out of me because I'm like, well, let's just do this and figure it out, right? So I think it's interesting. So now what I do is I actually train up two bots, and I always ask the same question. So now you write the code, and then I have a manager that migrates them together, say, all right, here's the final answer. Huge improvement in code quality by doing that. And I think we're seeing that apply all to any kind of content creation solution.
So fascinating, dude. Okay, so that goes into another rabbit hole that I'm curious about. So I was watching Mo Gwant, Solve for Happy. Did you ever read that book? I think you and I exchanged that book years ago.
I can't remember if I read it, but
Mo Gwant, he was the Google X executive, head of, I don't know if he was head of AI for a while, but Mo is one sharp cookie, man. And he's got this, I don't know if he got out of all that because his son passed away, and that's why he wrote the book about what it means to be happy. But I was watching him and Tom Bilyeu on the Impact Theory podcast, and he was saying that when AI was starting to come around decades ago, there was like 3 mandates that people promised never to do, and he goes, we've not adhered to this at all. But the first one was not allowing the AI to code, specifically because it can create its own offspring.
Yeah.
And what you were describing is like, so how do you so let's say you've got these functional bots that are working. How do you make sure that these don't code?
Well, I don't have the same fear of that, but we don't. So right now we don't execute our code. But if you go to ChatGPT now, if you have a ChatGPT Plus, I think everybody has access to the code plugin there, which is it'll run in Python. So you can ask things for charts, right? So what it does, if you ask for a chart of some data, it actually will write Python code to generate the chart and run that Python code in the browser. That's how it's doing it. So that is executing the code that you've created. We're more writing code that's not then getting reused. Like, we're not writing code to get reused in the system itself. We're writing code for tools, things we're trying to build, right? So it's a little bit different, but it is, that's where things get a little bit risky, but there's definitely ways you can put things in process to manage that. I don't have a big fear of that being a problem, at least in the near term, but that's where things definitely get weirder. They've done some of those things like where it programs a robot, and then the robot, there's an example not too long ago, I think, that the robot then killed itself, basically.
Well, I was going to say, when you're thinking about creating 2 positive, negative, you just talk about creating 2 children and you create a manager that manages the children. And it's like, can they create offspring that have different mandates then? You know what I mean? And maybe this is all tied into the one question I have is the protection of making sure that people are thinking through the 4th, 5th, 6th order effect of their decisions. Because when you talk about the data sets, who has access to what data sets? Because all it takes is one employee that says, oh, I'd really like to be able to get into the bank account of the company and see the financials, or the financials to see the bank account. What's the process behind that, dude?
Well, again, that goes back to, you need to create data separation and who has access to what data and what they can do with that. Because if they have access to the data that has the information, then they can do whatever they want to do, probably. So you really, really have to think about that. You have to limit that, and you have to have these data boxes of what is this data set going to be used for? And if we're going to change the use case for that, then you need to be conscious and make a conscious decision as a team that we are going to use this for this use case as well. And now what data are we putting in there, and think that through all that, say, oh, but we're putting this data in there. We need to create a different data set that doesn't have that as part of it in order to be able to do that. So this is where people need to understand that, and they need to understand how their data is going to get used and how to segment that data. Part of the problem with this is, like, our tool specifically allows you to build these different contexts, different data sets. Most people are not doing that right now, so they're putting it out there on public servers, or they could run their own, which is very complicated to, again, manage that and think through all the technical ramifications of it. So that's one of the things we're trying to solve for, and I think that's a big problem. That's our
maybe whole. Is it the goal to kind of make the permissions like based on how people would set up Active Directory or some sort of document management system? It's like make it easy.
That's essentially what Microsoft's doing, and I think there's a flaw in that you are there's data you might need in your job, but it's not data you want to train into your AI necessarily. And I think there's a big distinction between that. If you're going to do that, I think you really need to limit what access people are getting granted then at a much more fine tuned level, because there's stuff that you might need in your job, but you don't want it trained into AI because of how it might get used.
Very fascinating. Totally tracking you. Is the goal with your platform though to make the setting up of these decisions as, it's not as simple, but like kind of like setting up Active Directory. So it's not mirroring, but like that's kind of like the use case of like we're used to building permissions like that. So it's kind of, you're kind of guiding the people in the decision making.
Yeah, but so one of the problems is you go into, like, let's say you have a folder structure, but you can't really see who has access to that necessarily. It's maybe this group or something, right? But you don't really know who it is. Well, part of it is visibility, to say, oh, I'm in this data set and here's all the people that have access to this. And I can make it, anybody can see that. Maybe not everybody can change it, right? But anybody should be able to see that so they can clearly understand who's getting this data and why, and if that's changing, what's changed about this, so that it's visible to everybody. We're also making it really easy so that you can just drag and drop your files and then be working with those as a data set. Because I think you're going to want lots of small data sets eventually, versus a master data set for your company. You'll want to be very deliberate. Like, let's say you're creating marketing content. You don't want all past content. You want to approach that, how are we going to going forward? And let's say we rebranded or we changed logo or we changed something. I don't need any of that. I want to know, how are we messaging? What's our target and strategy going forward? So I want to be very conscious of, we need all that past stuff possibly for things, but going forward, this is how we're trying to message for this. You want to be very conscious about what's going into that data set.
Got it. How fast do you, like, when you're having these conversations with, like, and I'm specifically putting the lens of the middle market here, a few million in revenue to a couple $100 million in revenue, give or take. How fast do you see, or do you think that this group of people are going to understand and execute this compared to, and here, bear with me for a second, compared to like Blackstone, JP Morgan? I mean, I saw that JP Morgan is launching their chat advisor, and I'm like, my God, wealth managers and asset allocators. My question is, Loren, is like the middle market, where over half of the jobs in the country are from the places that you and I are working with all the time. And then there's the big people who have different resources than us, dude, and have way more data and have, you know what I mean? So like, I'm just wondering, like, if you were to throw in a few years, is the starting blocks even fair?
Yeah, well, that's what I would say. And this is why we exist, right? This is what we're trying to solve for. So I think this is interesting, though. If you read press releases from a lot of the large companies out there, Fortune 500 companies, a whole lot of them are saying, nope, we're not allowing AI. But they're working on AI solutions, and they're working on, just like you said, they're building a chatbot, or they're building, but very specific solutions for specific cases. And this is, I think it's the same approach that a smaller organization needs to take, but now you just need the tools to actually be able to do that and implement that. So there's all sorts of, like, if they built a chatbot, well, how did they do that? There's all sorts of chatbot tools out there specifically that you could build off of. We actually think that you could build that off of, with the right training, we can build that off of like a ChatGPT solution as well. So our goal is, right now, it's very much kind of an interface like ChatGPT, but you can basically say, here's a template of a prompt, And now we want to be able to expose that as an API. So you say, I'm creating a chat bot for, like, you could have an Arcona chat bot, right? That here's all the data set I'm giving it to use against it. And here's a pre-built prompt. And now a person can ask a question. It gets inserted into the whole prompt. I just got to back up for 1 second. So people are amazed. They prompt like they prompt for Google, right? I would say, I think our smallest prompt we use is 6 pages. And many of our prompts are like, I think I have 15-page prompts that when we go do something. And so a whole bunch is the template. And then I insert the question, which might be a paragraph or a sentence or something like that. But it's getting to the whole prompt. So we will build templates that then, if you're doing it like a chatbot, we can interject into that template. So it sets a whole bunch of context automatically, and then it just inserts the question. So you can make sure that your customers are getting a better response out of that and not using it for, bad information, bad data, bad results.
Which goes back to, this is why your platform that you're working on is so important, because like, as I've been working with GPT, we've been doing it on the ops side as well as on the content side. And for all the reasons we've talked about, we've limited, because confidential information, I don't want all my IP out there, obviously. Yep. Client information, but like, there's always the threshold of, hey, 2,800 or less. So like, you can't even put the super prompt into it sometimes, because then it doesn't have any room for other stuff. Am I thinking about that right? Because like, I've tried to string together questions on the public facing ones, and it's like, I'd be like making some progress, and then it would be like, AI and cats and cybersecurity. I'm like, what the hell?
Exactly. So here's a couple tips for everybody. So number one, if you want to do this has to only be with public facing data. Marketing data, you may do this, though. You may choose. So what we've done with some of our customers in the short term, we're just going live on Thursday. Will be our first customer launch, and we'll be testing kind of with some beta customers for a little bit. But basically, we've been testing this with them, and they have taken and put all their marketing content. So they have private content that we have, so they haven't been able to do anything with that. But public content, put it on a hidden web page that they can query, and then use like ChatGPT, the public-facing ChatGPT. If you use, but you have to pay for it to get Plus, and then like they turned off the Bing integration now, but you can go use a plugin called Web Pilot and start off with your query and say, go load this page. And this can be massive. And so now it can load all that information in. And then you can still use like your prompt template about like what you want to do, feed that in, and now start to ask it questions. Now, the one thing about this though, ChatGPT is approximately, it only keeps the last 10 messages in your conversation. So if you have to go farther back than that to get like context to make this all work, it's going to lose that context. And that's where, you're off looking at cats or something, because it didn't understand, you lost its context, right? So you got to keep those things in mind as you're building these queries, which is why
that enhances your position of build the data set privately that you can train.
Correct.
So like, cause like, I can't wait, dude. And this is why, like, sign me up, dude. I cannot wait. Where it's like, I don't want to have to reiterate to AI Ryan that, by the way, this is where we're coming from. Like, I want to have the memory there.
Yeah.
Essentially. Right. I mean, it's the memory that we're missing is like,
yes.
Right.
Yeah, but that's coming. And, we're working on this. Lots of other people are working on this. There's a whole lot of different approaches out there right now. And so it's going to be interesting as to how that gets applied. There's a whole lot of different ways of doing that. The other thing I will just say is like what we're hoping right now, we're using Azure with OpenAI because it has the best security and it has good results. Like ChatGPT has very good results. But there are other AIs, especially for other things like image and video and audio and things like that. But there's also just other AIs, and they're all good at different things potentially. And our goal is to be AI agnostic, so that as we get to like this bot network running, I want to choose the right AI for the task. So I want our data files that we're using to be able to be leveraged with all these different AIs that you're using.
It's like AI management. You're managing the bots.
Yeah, exactly. Automatically, right? You upload a file and it just gets put into whatever format that the AI needs for each AI.
Super fascinating. A couple of questions as we're rounding up here is, so like going back to when I was saying like the middle market compared to the bigger people, like how receptive, like I'm just worried that people aren't going to adapt this the way that they should. And obviously you're going to have a job for a long time, dude, but like, what are you seeing?
We have tons and tons of interest. So I have so many people that want to start using this and trying it. And we have been very, like we're heavily focused on the security of this. We are working with people that have very, very confidential data, whether it's financials or personal data, things like that. And so we have focused really hard on making sure our solution is highly secure. We are just rolling this out on Thursday, but we have a massive list already of people that want to start.
So you think people are ready for it, which is in the middle market, which is good.
Yeah. And I think as more people do, so let me throw this out as well. So one of the challenges is like, how do you go implement this in your organization? We were trying to figure out how to teach people about this. So we have an implementation process we now work through, but we've also created a training program around this. And August 1st, our training program will launch. And so that is a 15-hour program for whoever's going to be on this implementation team.
And that's where the one that you and I were talking about, if we can plug that into the academy and people could purchase that or something like that too. We'll figure that out at a later date for the listeners. But
yep. So, but that will be, we cover, like we have an hour just on how to implement and how to implement with your team. And there's a workbook for that and stuff. So as well as then we go through there's about 10 hours of kind of business centric functionality on, there's like 10 sessions. So there's like one on marketing content, right? So how to think about marketing content in your business and using AI for that.
Got it.
And then there's one on, and there's a whole variety of very specific, business oriented training.
I love it. One of my other last kind of concept or questions is like, or comments is, I think about when we're thinking about investing and owning companies, dude, and like the goal of creating more sustainable, predictable, transferable cash flow, like the game is going to be completely changed in mergers and acquisitions over the next 1 to 3 years. Cause I think about it, Loren, like I take this loose friend of mine, Tommy Mello, who's had a podcast. He's in the home services space. He's in a young entrepreneurs group with me. And he can take based on his sales marketing, see if you can riff off of this, because like what he does, Loren, is he takes the sales marketing processes, the KPIs, all that stuff in the garage door space. So he went from 2 trucks to 170 million in revenue and 700 employees or some shit like that in like 6 years. Cause he's like, I can take a company that's doing $1 million in EBITDA, plop my systems on there and generate 3 million in 3 years or 13, or what do you say, 18 months or 24 months, whatever the hell it was. But he's just taking the systems. And I'm like, if you were to take that concept, but then someone's doing AI, I mean, my God, you can look at these assets that are companies and mean like, these people haven't, it's still in PDFs and, green bar charts, like.
But that's the value of AI, right? So I think it's interesting. And this is why I don't see any shortage of people that want to do this. There's a lot of people that are looking at how to systemize, how to build those efficiencies and how to really build those efficiencies into a process, right? And that's where AI, some people just can't do it because they just don't have the bandwidth and the time the way things are right now. But if we can scale your team 50% and all of a sudden that gives them that 50% bandwidth to actually be able to put towards documenting, scaling, and if the AI can help do a lot of that based on what your team is doing on a daily basis, now you've built out your process and you have a scalable process. And maybe there's some refinement to that, but it's building it automatically. And this is where I think that knowledge capture piece of this is going to be very, very, very important as you integrate your team with the AI bots to actually be able to effectively do that. Because now you say, okay, I bought this company. The bots are already set up to do those tasks, and now it's like, here's the new person that in that company that needs to do this role.
And think about integration with mergers and acquisitions, dude. Like. You have it's the whole thing is going to be even it's going to have a completely another dimension to the mergers and acquisitions because you have all these functional areas and all these things, but then you're going to say whose AI is better than whose? Do you merge them or and also how do you value something when you can see that it can grow exponentially after you purchase it?
Well, I think the valuation piece is an interesting thing. I was going to ask you about that sometime because I'm curious.
Well, it's, honestly, before you hold that thought, it's like at the simplest way, it's normalized EBITDA and the multiple. The multiple is how many years of EBITDA someone's willing to give someone based on the risk. So if it's 5, I don't like years 6 and 7. I mean, I'm dumbing it down very simple, but like when you throw on like the perception of scale into the future, like it's like, do we think that the cash flow is more sustainable because of AI or less sustainable? I mean, I think a lot of people are wondering that themselves.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that, but I think that's the right question. That's what you need to be thinking about as you're helping companies work with us, right? And I think there's going to be, just like any technology boom, we're going to have an AI boom here for technology companies in the short term. But I think this is going to settle out fairly quickly in the sense that there's going to be valuable processes that can be implemented right now. I mean, think back to like the .com boom. People were spending $10 million to try to create an e-commerce site and things
with
like that.
Servers and warehouses.
Right. And that we're not in that same world anymore. So there's going to be a little boom in the sense that there's all these possibilities, but there's going to be people doing it. And there's going to be different approaches, which is good. We need those different approaches. But it's going to settle down, I think, fairly quickly to like, if you're a business that wants to implement this, here's your options for kind of the generic stuff. And then here's specific options for specific use cases, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to have kind of these very specific ones and very general, and you'll be able to apply the right thing for the right task. Again, though, you have to go back. What is your business goal? And then, how are you going
to... And I think go back to the business goal and really the quality of the team at the top, Loren, and their ideas and their vision. Because like what also, like I was approaching it earlier in our conversation about like, is it going to be fair with the Blackstones, the JP Morgans? But if we actually, I'm talking on both sides of my mouth and I'm aware of that, is we could flip that and be like, literally those people, the JP Morgans and the Blackstones, should be scared of the two people in the basement.
Oh, now. For sure.
So it's like everybody's scared of each other.
I think that's actually the bigger opportunity. So more so than any other technology I've seen over the years, this is a bigger opportunity for a small organization. Like in the very short term, these big companies have already been working on this a long time, and they have something they can roll out and implement fairly quickly and get the publicity out of that. I think it's just as competitive. Like we're getting close to where anybody can implement a solution that can just rock their industry very quickly in AI at a very cost-effective, cost.
Interesting data point behind that. Me, Joel, and Matt were working on a sample. We're just kind of playing around with this a couple months ago. And we were like, hey, on our financial dashboard, can we marry up a strategic plan with the financial dashboard? And we were just messing around, dude. And we were like, hey, GPT, let's assume we're a manufacturing firm with 10 million in revenue, and we have a $3 million backlog, but we don't have the capacity to get rid of the backlog. Can you come up with a strategic plan to help us extinguish that backlog? Boom! Strategic plan. Then, there was a couple other prompts back and forth, but then it was like, can you take and build a CFO strategic plan that mirrors the CEO's strategic plan? It did that. And then we said, hey, take number 6, which is contribution margin, and build a 13-week action plan for contribution margin. It did that. I mean, we went through this exercise, Loren, and Joel and Matt, when they were doing the private equity roll-up, they bought 18 companies in 16 months. They were spending $5 million a month with EY for integration and all this junk with probably these 24-year-olds that didn't know shit, that they're getting billed, $300 an hour. They were like, Ryan, this thing that took us 10 minutes was better than anything we got from EY.
Yep. Well, that's where there's so many areas like that. As an example, I've kind of been helping a company I've been working with for many, many years, and kind of as their outsourced CTO, and they're buying another company. And so the company provided they provide the code, but they had like 3/4 of a page of documentation on the system, right? And then they're like, there's like 9 a.m. And then it's like 10 o'clock. They're like, hey, let's have a call at 11 to ask some questions. We can try to figure this code out. We got on the call at 11. I'm like, well, I just have 2 questions. I'm like, where can I do that? How is this where this needs to happen? Is this where this needs to change? And like, how do you even know that? Like, this is hundreds of pages of code, and I just gave it to you. I'm like, well, I ran it through my AI and produced like 50 pages of documentation. And then I asked it about the documentation, like, where would I do this and this? And their developer was blown away. But those things are getting applied all over the place. So whether it's financial, M&A, development, marketing, like this is getting applied this way everywhere. And it's about when you make these decisions. So there's lots of cases where it's like, okay, we need to do this every day or every week or every step of the process. But then there's other things like, oh, how could we use AI to this? It's a one-off thing maybe, but I need to figure out how I'm going to use AI with this, or should I use AI with this? And how do you make those decisions on the fly to actually?
Is it agreed? And like, is it kind of almost you could bifurcate where like the standard operating procedures of your business, but then all of the other one-off things, like the couple things we just mentioned, it's almost like people's default should be, how does AI apply to this problem right now? Is it applicable or not? And is it safe or not? And then go back to normal.
Yeah,
it's like,
I agree with that. Yep.
Dude, I had so much fun. So 2 final questions for you. What does it mean to be intentional for you? Especially with AI as a wrapper with this whole conversation.
I think this applies to AI as well, but I would say it's to execute a plan with purpose.
If people want to get on the wait list, they want to reach out to you, they want to follow you. My guess is there's a few people intrigued about this conversation. Where can people find you?
Modelmind.ai. And you can also look me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect if you have any interesting use cases. We're always interested in talking to people about their use cases. And if nothing else, I do a half hour just to talk through your situation if you want to just get an idea of how to think through how you might implement this in your business. I have talked to a lot of CEOs in the last 6 months, and it's fascinating. I'm very passionate about it. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us, and there's a lot of opportunity for our business owners that we work with to build interesting things that can really add value to their businesses and to their customers.
Awesome, Loren. I got to tell you, man, as a friend, it's really cool to watch this all unfold, because when I met you, was it 7 years ago or something like that? And we were talking about bold and abundance and like flying cars and AI 7 years ago. And it was just all fiction kind of. And I'm like, I don't know if I said this to you. I'm like, it's like you've been preparing this long for the Super Bowl and it's finally here. And you just like, you knew exactly what to do with the moment, which is very cool to watch, man.
I think it's interesting. I had this, the exact idea we're implementing right now in 2000. But it wasn't possible. I told my best friend, and he's like, "That's the dumbest idea you've ever had." I run all my ideas by him because he gives honest feedback, but he's never said that before. And I was like, "Okay, well," and I told him, "Now I'm doing this." He's like, "Yeah, it makes sense. Now you can do it." So,
Mr. Practical, but that's awesome, dude. Loren, thank you so much for coming on the show, dude.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I really appreciate it and really appreciate what you do.